This is most likely the last Professional Licensure Committee hearing of this session. I wanted to take the time to thank you for your active participation on this committee. Second, it's not common that a chairman of a committee has to justify why a piece of legislation is in their committee, but because we've seen so much correspondence saying it should be in the Insurance Committee, I wanted to address that issue. In the packet, the binder, I've provided a copy of the June 8th memo written to members of the Senate from the Insurance Federation and the Blues regarding the Gut and Replace Amendment in the Senate. The first sentence in the second paragraph in that memo says, "We appreciate the bulk of this proposed amendment deals with licensure issues, ensuring that telemedicine be responsibly practiced and regulated among all types of providers." The morning of June 19th, I was driving the speaker back from an early morning speaking engagement, and he received a call from an insurance lobbyist making the case as to why the bill should go to the Insurance Committee. I must admit that raised my eyebrows. I leave it to each of you to decide what the reason and motivation for wanting the bill to go to the Insurance Committee was. But from my point of view, the fact that the lobbyist was making calls to intercede on process was concerning to me. Enough so that I began to ask what committee would give this bill a thorough review that it deserved, and made our case to the Speaker's office. And when I say our case, I'm speaking about every member of this committee. I will put this committee up against any in the House for the ability to deal with issues from competing interests. You know them well, but for the audience and the insurance companies that don't regularly appear in front of this committee, I'm going to give you some examples. Physicians versus nurses, ophthalmologists versus optometrists, anesthesiologists versus nurse anesthetists, and on and on. In other words, we act like Solomon on a regular basis. We deal with scope of practice issues all the time. Also, most times a medical profession seeks licensure, it's to be entitled them for reimbursement, insurance reimbursement. And reimbursement is a subject discussed in this bill. Personally, I've been in the insurance business since 1979, working for Aetna as an underwriter, and then for the last 37 years as a broker. In that capacity, seeing insurer and provider points of view on a regular basis. Insurance is an incredibly important part of our economy and our lives. Every day, we transfer risk to health insurance companies by paying a premium. By paying that premium, that frees up other money for us to invest in our homes, cars, and education. Imagine if we did not have insurance and had to put money aside to pay for a catastrophic medical procedure. That being said, insurers are not always right. They try to limit risk. One of the first lessons I learned working for Aetna is this example. Insurance companies' ideal risk to insure is a piece of steel underwater to insure it against fire. Let me give you an example of a piece of legislation that was signed into law that the insurance industry fought vehemently, but has turned out to be highly successful. When Governor Casey was in office, the full tort, limited tort auto insurance bill was signed into law. As part of the law, if a customer selected limited tort, the insurance company had to reduce rates by 12%. Insurers went ballistic. So much so that Aetna was going to pull out of the state for automobile insurance. It just so happens at the time that Governor Casey was insured by Aetna, and I remember the cartoon in the newspaper depicting him opening up his cancellation notice in the mail. I remember that well, and the actions of the insurers makes it clear that this is the committee to review this bill. I committed to keep Chairman Pickett in the loop. I committed to not put my finger on the scales. I traveled to her district for telemedicine demonstration at Guthrie Hospital. I also want to thank Garth Shipman and Alan Cohen, the majority and minority staff on the Insurance Committee, for their valuable input in meeting with myself and also participating in staff-only meetings. In addition, I want to thank Senate staff for hours of time meeting with me and our committee and Insurance Committee staff. And of course, as the committee knows, Wayne and Marlene, you have been great in this process. Kelly, thank you for putting the binder material together. And I want to recognize Representative Quinn. I'm not sure if she's in the room at this point, but she's planning on attending today, for her leadership on this issue. She has spent the last year and a half working with the Senate on this legislation, and I appreciate her taking the time to be here later today. Let me make it clear. This bill should not be used to settle the big picture reimbursement disputes between insurance companies and providers. As one insurance company has said, this bill should compensate health care providers for their professional medical evaluations and treatment. It should not be a source of guaranteed revenue for device manufacturers. This bill should not be a vehicle guaranteeing seed capital for experimental telemedicine. Now, this time I'd like to review the binder. This is a little bit different than we normally do. We get packets of testimony, but what I wanted to run through with you in your binder, just to give you an idea of what's taken place over the last couple months. You'll see a timeline. The bill was assigned to this committee on June 19th. And I've listed every meeting that I've participated in, every demonstration that we participated in across the state. And keep in mind that the reason that we had demonstrations done across the state, prior to those demonstrations, I traveled the state to see what would be the most appropriate ones for members to see. It is an election year. It was summer vacation time, and I thought that it would be most appropriate, since I'm not running for re-election, to invest the time to make sure that we could properly vet this issue. So you'll see the multiple pages of meetings, whether it was with insurance companies, meeting with providers, seeing demonstrations. Totals about 50, and that doesn't include any of the staff meetings that we had discussing this issue. The next page shows the number of states that have already enacted parity telemedicine laws. Now, I'm not a proponent of one that says just because it's done in another state that it needs to be done in our state. We all know that the procedures and the way we operate in Pennsylvania in all states aren't the same. But I think it does raise some eyebrows again as to, other states are adopting this. In one of the conference calls with an insurance company and a provider, it was brought out that the national commercial insurers are saying that providers cannot use certain telemedicine delivery platforms because of the national companies that provide what I like to call the sore throat doctor. We've all seen, those of you who have attended the demonstrations, you've seen the specialist demonstrations at the provider hospitals. But you've probably also seen where if you get a sore throat, you're away on vacation, a lot of times you can dial up, right? Depending on your health insurance plan to get treatment on weekends, maybe when your doctor's not in. So there are companies that do that, and Teladoc is one of them. And I have a letter in the binder here saying that they absolutely do not require exclusivity. There's another letter a little further back in the binder from Amwell that says the same thing. I've also included the next letter there is the letter that I addressed in my opening comments, highlighted there in yellow, stating that this is a licensure, primarily a licensure bill. The Insurance Federation on September 10th sent an email to all of us on the committee, and it was addressing the legislation. I forwarded that email to Garth Shipman on the Insurance Committee, and the comments that Garth made are in red for all of you to digest. One of the things that was very telling was when one of the demonstrations, Representative Mako was not going to be able to attend a demonstration that we had set up in his area, so he came with myself, Wayne. I'm not sure if Marlene attended that one or not at Geisinger, but Garth Shipman was there. And one of the things that really was astounding at our discussion afterwards was Geisinger didn't say a word about problems with reimbursement. In fact, they had a handout for us, and that's the second. You see the first one is from Lehigh Valley Health Network. The second one is from Geisinger, and you'll see that almost everything is in green. So they're being reimbursed from all of their insurers. I was taken aback, so much so that I had to send a couple follow-up emails saying, are you sure that you're being reimbursed? So what we did was we asked other providers that we had already gone and seen around the state that had problems with reimbursement, and had them fill out the same grid. And we still have a few more that are coming in. But you can see on the others that there's some partial payments. There's a lot of red. UPMC, Penn Medicine is almost all red. UPMC has some reimbursement. There's no comment on here whether that's primarily from their own health plan. One of the things that I asked for, I was preparing a executive summary for the leadership team on this issue, and Independence Blue Cross was kind enough to provide a list of questions for the provider community. So that's the next section that you have there. There were 10 questions that they asked. I will tell you that these answers are provided by Penn Medicine, but I thought they were very thorough, and they were excellent questions, and the answers I thought were very informative for all members. At the conclusion of their response, though, they did also include potential questions to ask the insurance community. So there's 4 questions there. Now, finally, in the back of the, and I'll conclude my remarks, finally, in the back of the binder, you'll see the telemedicine health policies for Aetna, Capital, Cigna, Highmark, Independence, United Healthcare, UPMC, and Geisinger. And the reason I provided those to you is in your spare time, when you want to start reading insurance policies, it'll show you certainly the diverse application of telemedicine across the state. So I think that pretty much summarizes what I had to say, other than a few more thank yous. I wanted to take the time to thank UPMC, UPMC Health Plan, Geisinger Health System, Geisinger Health Plan, Allegheny Health Network, and Highmark. All of those are what we would call integrated systems, and come at this with a little different approach. In fact, Allegheny Health Network and Highmark will be testifying. I also want to thank Lehigh Valley Health Network, Community Services Group, Penn Medicine, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, the University of Pittsburgh, and Guthrie Medical Group, all of whom made themselves available for demonstrations. And finally, I'd like to thank Independence Blue Cross and Capital Blue Cross for multiple meetings, several of which were set up at the spur of the moment, but they were able to accommodate myself and even Representative Quinn on a very short basis. At the front of the book binder, you'll see that there is a Highmark commercial medical policy, and in there it talks about medical necessities and the appropriateness of clinical care. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.